Okay, so we're going to have a look at how you draw reciprocal graphs on this one. So what I want you to do is to take a moment just to draw out this particular table, make sure you've got all of the values in it, and then we'll work through and make sure that you know how to fill it in. You are allowed a calculator for this one, so by all means go ahead with your calculator and figure out where we got a solution of y equals negative 0.1 from. And then when you're ready for me to explain it for you, hit play. Okay, so as when we're doing any type of graph question, it's the x value that we're often given, and we need to use that to find the y value. So I'm going to pop my x value in a bracket, so it reminds me to calculate the y value. I'm going to be doing y equals 10 over something, and it's the something that is going to be the x value that's going to keep changing that I would substitute in to work it out. So for example, the first one, if I was to put in x is minus 100, on your calculator, that will then give you negative 0.1. For the next one, I end up with y equals 10 over negative 20, and we end up at that point with negative 0.5. So we can then start to fill in the table. Okay, it's a negative 0.5. If I then do y equals 10 over negative 10, that's going to give me a -1 as a solution, so -1 would go there. So I'm just going to give you a minute again just to go through and fill in the rest of the table. So use your calculator to help you. Remember, you're doing 10 divided by the x value. Don't round anything at this point. Okay, so the remaining values that you should have then should be -2, -10, -20, then +20, +10, +2, +1, 0.5, and 0.1. So hopefully you've got all of those. One thing just to be mindful of is there's one value that we often see used when we're drawing graphs, which would have been x equals 0. So if you pop x equals 0, or substitute that into the equation, so you've got 10 over 0, and see what your calculator display comes up with. Hopefully at this point, this tells you error. Okay, the reason for that is anything divided by 0 technically doesn't exist, is undefined, or you will sometimes see it written down as infinity. Okay, so if you're sharing something into no amounts in that sense, so 0, you will often end up with infinity, and it means you can't draw it for the graph. Okay, so now I want you to make sure that you've got a set of axes drawn, and we need to make sure that our x-axis goes from -100 up to +100, and that our y-axis needs to go from really tiny, so -20 up to +20, but we will have some small values to plot. Remember, your scale needs to be equal throughout, so I'm just going to get you started. On this one, I need to make sure it goes up to 100, and therefore I would go up in 20, so 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100. And the same going in the negative direction, so -20, -40, and so on, so that you can see where they came from. And -100, and then remember the y-axis, we wanted to go up to 20, so I'm going to go up in 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20. You can go up in 4s, whatever you find easiest, as long as it fits and you've got that consistent scale, which is important. Okay, so that's my y-axis. This is my x-axis, and again, the same going down the bottom, so -5, -10, -15, and -20. Okay, and then you just want to plot your points. Now, some of the points are going to be really quite tricky to plot. So if you see, we've got -100 and -0.1, so it's really teeny tiny down here, really low, and as close to 0, just showing it slightly above on that one. In fact, it's even better if I draw it below the axis, so that's where it should have been, just teeny tiny under there. The next one, -20, so all the way over here, -20 and -0.5, so that's just going to be about there. And then my -10, so in the middle here, and -1, so just building up slowly. -5 is going to be down at -2, and as you see, -1 is going to be down at -10, We're getting closer down here, and then we get to negative 0.5. So we're really close to the axis, but not quite touching. And that was all the way down there at minus 20. Now, based on my other graph drawing skills, you can see that it's not going to come out particularly easy for me on here. So we're going to do a Blue Peter moment of here's one I made earlier, just so that you can see this is what a reciprocal graph should look like when drawn. So it often has the two different parts of the graph. Okay, so two separate ones, and it's often separated by two lines. In this case, it's the axes, but it doesn't have to always be the axes, but it's these two sort of L-shaped graphs here. Okay, now this line that comes down here that the graph gets very close to but doesn't in fact touch, and the same for this line over here, is in fact called an asymptote. Okay, so the asymptotes mean that the graph gets extremely close to but never touches or crosses that line. So you've got a worksheet to have a go at drawing reciprocal graphs, and hopefully you can see the same sort of design and pattern happen each time you draw them. And basically, for anything to be a reciprocal graph, it's going to be a value divided by x. Okay, so that's the general format for the equation of a reciprocal graph. If you need help with anything, then please let me know.